If you have not watched the previous videos about this, I would make sure you watch those first because I'm going to go through this one a little quicker as if you've already watched those because I don't have the steps written out like I do in the other videos. So I'm going to complete the square in order to convert this into vertex form. First things first, you cannot have an a value other than 1. But when I divide the a value out, I'm only going to divide it out of the first 2 terms. That number does not disappear, it goes out front. And if you remember the previous steps, I always put a space after the B and after the C. So I'm going to kind of combine those steps into one. Just bear with me and then I'll explain it. So dividing by -2, I would have positive x squared plus 11x. Now the next step after I'm done with this one would have been to put some spaces in here. So I'm just going to put the spaces in now. So that's kind of steps 1, 2, and 3-ish. So we took out the -2, but we only took the -2 out of the first 2 terms. That 1 was not touched. I don't need to deal with the 1. That just hangs out on the end. I also put a space after the B value and after the C value. What's going to go there is what I get when I find B over 2 squared. Now remember, B has changed. B is now positive 11. It is no longer negative 22. So 11 is not divisible by 2. I'm going to keep this as a fraction. 11 squared is 121. 2 squared is 4. So that is what goes in the space. All right, so plus 121 over 4. Now is where it gets tricky. That second space is where I need to undo what I just put in there. Because as of now, I don't have the same equation because I just took this 121 over 4 out of thin air and I put it into this space. So what I need to do is undo it. However, like previously explained in another example, this is not really just 121 over 4. It's -2 times 121 over 4. So you can do this off to the side if you want. It's the same thing as -242 over 4, which would reduce to -121 over 2. Now, this -121 over 2 is the number that I just put in here that didn't exist already. Okay, that arch that I just outlined again, this right here is -121 over 2. So you have to think about that. I just took this -121 over 2 out of nowhere and put it into the equation. So in order to not change any other values, I need to put the opposite of that in the second space. The opposite would be positive 121 over 2. So if your number in the first space ends up equaling a negative, you need to put a positive in the second space. So to finish it up, the next step is to factor what's inside of the parentheses. So I just put a box around it. That's what I need to factor. So you could sit there all day and try to figure out what multiplies to 121 over 4 and adds to 11, or It's the number that I just put a box around and I put arrows pointing to. 11 over 2 times 11 over 2 is 121 over 4. 11 over 2 plus 11 over 2 is 11. So those are my two numbers. So I'm trying to bring everything else down with me. I just factored. Now, because I have the same factor twice, you can write it with an exponent of 2. And my final step is going to be to add 121 over 2 to the 1 that's already over there. So making a common denominator, I'm going to do 2 over 2. So this ends with a plus 123 over 2.